Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to Bullony Basketball. This is episode 29. I'm here with Johnny. How's your week been, Johnny?
Hey. Had to throw out another Kawhi there. How is everybody doing? Glad to be back. Finished up my, spring semester of my freshman year. So that is out of the way, and now I'm ready to talk some basketball.
Yeah, now we're got that out of the way. Now we're back to business with NBA talk. But we got a lot of stuff to talk about today. And the last few episodes, they started with The Last Dance. We're going to start with The Last Dance again. Episodes 5 and 6 happened this past week, and there's a few things that we could talk about. I think the first thing that we'll talk about was kind of the thing that I think hit most people the most at the beginning of episode 5, and that was the Kobe intro, his connection with Michael Jordan, all that stuff. What did you think of that, Johnny?
Yeah, I think it really provided some great insight for a lot of people because on the surface, we don't really think of Jordan and Kobe having a great relationship. To be fair, we don't really think of Jordan having a great relationship with anybody. That's just the type of competitor he is. So to see the true bond that they had, I thought that was very fascinating. At the All-Star game, you could see Jordan saying, all that guy wants to do is take me one-on-one. I'm going to make him work on the other end. Just the competitive spirit that both of them have. And I think a quote from Kobe kind of summed it up best. He says, there are no 5 championships. I do not have 5 rings without Michael Jordan. He truly was Jordan's big brother. Jordan embodied him. Jordan did everything he could to help him. And I know this part wasn't in The Last Dance, but even just at the ceremony at Staples Center, you could see how emotional Jordan got talking about Kobe.
Yeah, I think the connection there was definitely real. And I like that's almost like stuff that, it almost felt like it hadn't happened, obviously it says, this kind of in the, I don't even want to do that because it's just going to make us sad, but it says it right at the beginning, so obviously everyone knows what happened, but you see them walking by one another in the locker room in '98. We're hearing Kobe talk and all that stuff, so it almost feels like none of it happened for almost a brief second, which it was cool in that aspect. I think the relationship was definitely huge. I think that probably for any NBA fan, anyone that would compare anyone to Michael Jordan, I think that's who it would be. But yeah, I think the relationship went not only just the fact that they drew comparisons to each other in play style and their best, most iconic moves, but also how they were with one another.
Yeah, I think we just don't really, it still didn't feel real that Kobe wasn't with us anymore or isn't with us anymore. But then again, we also kind of got to see the relationship between the two of them that we don't really know about.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, though, there were other storylines kind of in The Last Dance. They took us through, the second championship from the Bulls where, Jordan was drawing comparisons to Clyde Drexler, and then ultimately he's I have to beat him down. The third championship where, he's trying to get revenge for Charles Barkley winning MVP in the regular season. And then, the fact of MJ kind of being, worn down, like they said. What did you make kind of all those events?
To me, I think the funniest thing was all the false narratives that Jordan made up just to motivate himself. It wasn't even Clyde that said he was on the same level as Michael. It was the media. And then I know this wasn't even part of the 3 people. The whole thing about him wanting to guard Kukoc because the Bulls wanted to sign him over Pippen, and just all these things that show the competitive flair that Jordan has. And that's what he says. He says he doesn't have a gambling problem; he has a competitive problem.
Yeah, and I think from that aspect, I know people whenever they like to compare eras, they put one person in today's era that played long ago or someone from today's era 20, 30 years ago or something like that. I've heard some people say how would Jordan fare with the media as big as it is today. But I mean, like you said, people weren't even really saying that. Like, they were comparing Clyde because, I mean, he was probably the best shooting guard in the league that wasn't named Jordan, So, I mean, who else could you compare him to that was kind of just going to elevate Clyde a little bit? But I think that, I mean, he literally made up narratives to help him out in that case. I mean, even with Charles Barkley winning the regular season MVP, although people still probably thought Jordan was the best player in the league, like, he made that up, to come back at him. And I mean, especially like when they played the Knicks in '93 and they were down 2-0, and people were making this stuff about Jordan, like how he was out late, gambling, all this stuff, and then he came out and he basically gave him the business. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and to be fair, the MVP has always been, and I feel like it will always be, a regular season award, and Barkley put up great numbers. It's not like it was obnoxious that he won the MVP. He even said, I know I'm not the best player in the league, but I had the better regular season. And so if that's the motivation that Jordan needed to win, then that's what he was going to come up with. He was going to create his own narrative. But in terms of the whole three-peat in general, I think another interesting discussion to be had is which team is the greatest team ever? Is it the original three-peat team? Is it the second three-peat team? Essentially, what decides it, a main part of it, is the whole Horace Grant versus Dennis Rodman discussion. And so, I don't know, we don't really need to delve into it too much. I think that's another thing that people like to see is we always think of the big three with Rodman, but Horace Grant was a great player in his own right, and when he moved on to Orlando, was still just as good. And then we did mention Charles Barkley. He was a monster for his size, to see the numbers he put up. And he even said it in the game. I think it's the game where the Bulls clinched. He said, I put up a great game, but Michael put up a better game. And that's just kind of wrapping up the 90s in a nutshell. Is they were a bunch of great players. There was one player that stood in their way, and that's Michael Jordan.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, obviously winning 6 rings in like 9-10 years, says it all. But we're gonna move on though to something we've done over the past few weeks now, and that's start, bench, cut. We got 4 of them for this week, and the first one is gonna involve some like all-time type of discussion with 3 of the greatest point guards of all time. Obviously, you have Magic Johnson, you have Isaiah Thomas, the one that played on the Pistons, and then Steph Curry. Where would you go with this in your start, bench, cut?
Well, to me, this is pretty straightforward. I'm going to start Magic, I'm going to bench Curry, and I'm going to cut Isaiah. And this is no slander against Isaiah. He's still a top 5 point guard of all time, but I think Magic is number 1 on the list, and basically number 1 on everybody's list. And I personally have Curry at number 2 already. So to me, there's not much of a discussion to be had. The revolution, the way that Curry has revolutionized the game, 3 championships, unanimous MVP season. He has a stacked resume, and some will say he doesn't have that finals MVP, but it's not like he's underperformed in the finals. He's still put up great numbers, and he still has the chance to add to this resume.
Yeah, I mean, I have the same order. I have Magic, Curry, and then Isaiah Thomas being cut. The only thing is I'll say is, like, I guess it kind of depends. Because we're just start, bench, cutting with like where they kind of are all time, I'd say. I guess it would depend like what team you're looking at. I mean, if you had a Klay Thompson around you who could, shoot the 3 and play defense, then it would make sense to even pick Curry. But maybe if you had a guy, another guard that can, like maybe like a Devin Booker who isn't really a great defender, maybe it would make sense to have Isaiah Thomas instead, because, he can, hold his own defensively. But yeah, I have Magic, then Curry, then Isaiah Thomas as well.
Yeah, I guess I could entertain Isaiah over Curry, but to me, I just couldn't get myself to get over that hill. So I think the list that Bubbles came up with is one that many others will agree with. I don't really see anybody taking Magic out of the number 1 spot, so it would just be a matter of flipping Curry and Zeke. But shall we move on to the next one? Here we have an interesting list It includes Grant Hill, Brandon Roy, and Penny Hardaway. So you have two players whose careers were cut short by injury. We don't know what their necessarily would have looked like, or if they would have gotten to the promised land at some point. That is Grant Hill and Brandon Roy. But we did see a career out of Penny Hardaway with the Magic. So how would you rank these three people?
Okay, I'm gonna repeat them because when you said them, like your mic kind of sounded like really staticky and stuff. But okay, so I mean, like you said Brandon Roy, Grant Hill, Penny Hardaway. We're kind of just like ranking, I guess like non-injuries is how we'd go. And I mean, this might be surprising. I'd probably pick Brandon Roy to start, and the reason I'd pick him to start is because, like Brandon Roy, Grant Hill, both of them were like really athletic. Penny Hardaway in his later years was a solid shooter, but Brandon Roy kind of had both of those features. He could shoot the ball. He was very athletic. I mean, we see a lot of players like that. Like Vince Carter or something like that. He could have been one of those players. I would bench Grant Hill, and I'd cut Penny Hardaway. It's really tough because like when they were all healthy, I don't think any of them got past the first round. So it's kind of hard to judge where they could, lead their team to, but that's just the order I have.
So I agree with Grant Hill being benched, but I actually flip-flop Penny and Brandon Roy. I was on Basketball Reference earlier, kind of just scrolling around, looking through Penny Hardaway, and his numbers actually elevate in the playoffs. That is his win shares for 48, his points, just the important counting stats, if I will. Those are inflated and go up during the playoffs. So I know he never won a championship. I think he made it. I think that Magic team made it out of the first round, if I'm not mistaken, with Shaq and Horace Grant. Regardless, Penny did perform well in the playoffs. But I think what this list really kind of tells us or kind of shows us is that injuries suck, man. Like, these Grant Hill and Brandon Roy were two amazing players, well on their way to great careers, and it just sucks to see careers cut short due to injury.
Yeah, I agree. I think all these guys would have been in the Hall of Fame. I mean, Grant Hill is in the Hall of Fame, but like I think Penny Hardaway, Brandon Roy would have been as well. I will say with Penny Hardaway, I think the thing I was talking about was like post Shaq, because I know there was a few years in there where he was healthy with the Magic before injuries started to kick in, and he was like the best player kind of on the team, but he just, I don't think he ever got past the first round in those years. But yeah, so we're gonna move on to 3 point guards all time, all in the top 10 discussion, I'd probably say, or at least close to it. So we have Steve Nash, we have Chris Paul, and we have Jason Kidd. You want to go first on this one?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll take it. I don't know if the viewers or the listeners, if you guys know how high I am on Chris Paul, but I think he's one of the most underrated players of all time. For sure, the most underrated point guard of all time. He topped my list at number one, so I'd start Chris Paul. I'm going to bench Steve Nash, and then I'd cut Jason Kidd. If you look at the 36 or 400 possession numbers, Chris Paul has averages more points, more assists, more steals. Better win shares per 48, better VORP, that's known as. Basically, better every advanced stat that shows the winning impact the player has on their team. Chris Paul blows them out of the water, and I know he hasn't won a championship, he hasn't even played in the NBA Finals, but he is just so good, and people do not give him credit.
Yeah, I think Chris Paul is definitely a very underrated player. I think a lot of that is kind of showing this year because people were slandering him last year for the Rockets' lack of success. But in terms of who I'm going to start, bench, and cut, I'm going to start Steve Nash. I mean, he is a 2-time league MVP, and I think a lot of people like to say he's a system player, but I kind of disagree with that because not only was he an All-NBA and All-Star player in Phoenix, but he was also that in Dallas. And people don't really give him credit for that. He also, one of his MVPs came when Amari Stoudemire missed like basically the whole season. And they lost Joe Johnson in the offseason. So I think, like, with that being said, Steve Nash is one of the more impactful players of all time and gets too much disrespect in that regard. I'm going to start him. I'm going to bench Chris Paul, though. I'm going to cut Jason Kidd, which might seem weird because Jason Kidd's the only one who's made not only one finals, but like three. You know, he made two with the Nets as pretty much the best player, one of the top players up there in MVP voting in his time with the Nets. And then, of course, he won one with the Mavericks. So it's pretty odd. But, I mean, Jason Kidd might be a little bit underrated too. But personally, I'm going to take CP3 over him, and I'm going to take Nash over CP3.
I can dig that as well. And, you know, I thought it was kind of obvious to cut Jason Kidd, as weird as that sounds, because you kind of outlined how great of a career he had. So I was just kind of torn apart with the CP3 versus Nash. But like I said, I'm a CP3 ride or die type of guy.
Yeah. And we're going to move on to three big men from today. So we have Kristaps Porzingis, Bam Adebayo, Karl Anthony Towns. Start, bench, cut. I'm going to go first on this one. I think it's pretty obvious to start Karl Anthony Towns. I think he's a top 3 center in the league with Embiid and Jokic. Now, when it comes to Porzingis and Bam Adebayo, this is interesting because Adebayo, I'd say, is a better passer, but Kristaps Porzingis is a better shooter and, of course, has the height advantage and is a really good rim protector, but so is Bam. I'm going to go with Porzingis on the bench, and I'm going to go with Adebayo being cut, as tough as that is, because I know Adebayo was an all-star, and Porzingis obviously wasn't, but when Porzingis gets back to 100% healthy, I don't know. I think it's going to be really tough going against that Mavericks team when they're in their prime. So I got Towns, Porzingis, Bam.
So we agree with Karl Anthony Towns. I do agree with saying that was obvious. I went Bam over Porzingis. So basketball reference, if you guys don't know, I am a big basketball reference. They have great stats, great ways to compare players. One thing they do is they have a metric called similarity scores, and if you click on a player and click on their similarity scores, what it does is it takes their win shares per year and it compares them to players that have had similar trajectories. And so when you look at Karl Anthony Towns, his similarity scores, his top 2 are Bill Russell and Shaquille O'Neal. I consider that to be some pretty good territory. Bam Adebayo has not played enough in order to be considered for this yet. Porzingis has, and here's Ryan Gomes and Walter Simon. Most of you probably don't know who they are. Personally, I don't either. I think that tells us quite a bit about him. The thing is, I really wanted to bench Porzingis. His height is there. He's a great shooter. He can handle the ball. Good rim protector. But I think Adebayo is just more of a winner for what it's worth. That kind of sounds a bit odd, but I think he just has the intangibles that will translate to winning better. And it may be because of the system he's in Miami, but I think he's kind of more of an all-around player that can do it all.
Yeah, I think that's a fair argument. The only thing I will say is that in Adebayo's case, I mean, and this is a reason like why I've seen people before, like whenever I talk about why I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a little bit overrated in the sense that a lot of the success of the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Miami Heat is like run through Chris Paul and Jimmy Butler. So, I mean, you take those guys off those teams. I mean, last year, the Heat weren't even a playoff team, and they still had, yes, D. Wade was near retirement, but he still had a pretty solid season. You know, so I don't know about that necessarily. I think Bam is a really good player, but I also look at the fact that I don't think he probably would be an all-star this year if Jimmy Butler wasn't in Miami to, you know, help elevate him and help elevate really the whole Heat team to warrant them probably 2 all-stars. So I also look at that when making my decision.
If you don't mind, I'll play a bit of devil's advocate here. How about, I mean, it's the same situation, if you will, in Dallas. Without Luka, to me, the Mavs are nowhere near where they are, playoff team at the moment. And even if you go back to New York, when it was Porzingis' team, they never made the playoffs. So I get where you're coming from, but I think it could also be used against KP.
Yeah, it definitely could. I mean, I don't know. I feel like some of those stats, though, I mean, you kind of have to like dig deeper into it. Who were the two players that you said were Kristaps was near? You said Ryan Gomes and who else?
Arthur Simon.
Wait, Arthur Simon? Is that what you said?
Walter. Walter.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I've heard of Ryan Gomes. I don't. Maybe I'm just like hearing the second name wrong, but I don't know who that is. But anyways, we're gonna move on to our next topic: the three most underrated playoff series in our opinion. You want to go first?
Yeah, let's go back and forth. Let's start with my first one. I guess I didn't really put these in order, but this is a first round series, and it was 6 years ago. It's Grizzlies Thunder. People may not remember it great. 7-game series, 4 straight games went into overtime. 4 straight playoff games went into overtime. Just think about that. That's your grit and grind Grizzlies that included Zach Randolph, Marc Gasol, Mike Conley, Tony Allen. This is your Thunder team that had KD and Westbrook. There was a lot of talent there. To go 7 games is one thing. To have 4 straight overtime games in the playoffs, to me, that's pretty incredible.
It's funny you mentioned that because I don't have that team on my list, but I was really close to putting that team on my list. One that I have, it's very long back, and it's like 1981 long back. And it's the Celtics Sixers. Now, back then the Sixers had like Dr. J. The Celtics had like a young Larry Bird. But actually the Sixers were up 3-1 in that series, and 5 of the games were within like 3 points. And the Sixers ended up blowing a 3-1 lead. They lost the last 3 games by 2 points or less, which is extremely close. And obviously, if they would have made the finals, they would have played the Houston Rockets. So it would have been Dr. J versus Moses Malone. And of course, over a little bit over a year later, they would have been teammates in Philly. But ultimately, I think if one of those teams wins a championship that year, because the Celtics actually won the title. But if the Sixers or the Rockets win a title that year, does Moses Malone ever go to Houston? Or go to Philly? I don't know if that ever happens, because obviously, if he would have won a ring in Houston, or if the Sixers would have won, and if he did go to the 76ers, then that might even be more of a kind of like snake move per se than even what Kevin Durant did with the Warriors, because like he joined the champions. I just think that's a bit interesting.
Yeah, there's certainly implications that go further than just the basketball court in that situation, the whole free agency thing the following year. I didn't go that far back on any of my series. Another one I have here is the 2008 Celtics. This one we had a young Derrick Rose. This also had 7 games. Only one game had more than 10 points. 5 of them were within 1 possession. It's not very often that you see a series go 7 games with 5 of them being decided by a 1 possession. Very close. 2 points separated by much. Celtics ended up winning it in 7. That was a very stacked Celtics team.
Yeah, actually, I was really thinking about putting that one on my list as well, but just didn't make the cut. But yeah, that was kind of like a back and forth series. Very interesting. Another one though that I have, it's from 2006, and it's the Clippers Suns. And I think a lot of people when they look at the Clippers, they say like they could never get past the second round. And when they think of that mainly, they'll think of like Chris Paul and Blake Griffin. Like how they had injuries, they could never get past the second round. But this team literally lost in 7, and they lost 2 games by like 3 points or less or something like that. And there was like a crucial 8-second violation in like game 5 when they ended up losing. And there was like 30 seconds left. Sam Cassell like literally just walked the ball up the floor, and it was an 8-second violation because he wasn't paying attention. But maybe if they do pay attention on that play, get a score, and they probably win that game and they go to the conference finals, and then no one can say that argument. But of course, the Suns were a really good team that year too. That was one of the years Steve Nash was MVP of the league. And yeah, I think that both those teams, it was very interesting. Clippers, of course, had like Elton Brand then, Corey Maggette. I think it's an interesting team on both sides.
People really sleep on those mid-2000 Suns teams, stacked with talent. Basically, we're 10 years ahead of our time in terms of how quick we played. But another thing that I guess I should say to all the listeners is we're discussing the most underrated playoff series, but not necessarily the best ones. And so that's kind of why our lists are the way they are. And so I guess I'll go with my third one here. It's the 94 Bulls Knicks. The reason I see it as underrated is because it didn't include Michael Jordan, and so just by public perception, it's not as likely to be talked about. That Bulls team still did have Tony Kukoc, it still did have Scottie Pippen. And the series went 7, but Ewing and the Knicks ended up winning it. I just think that people don't think of it as much simply because Jordan wasn't playing.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I know most people would probably remember like the Scottie Pippen dunk, but other than that, not many people talk about much else from that series. The third one I have, and this is going to seem weird, it's literally a playoff series from last year. And I think it's already a little bit underrated, but I think definitely in about 5 years, a lot of people are probably going to forget this playoff series. And it's the Trailblazers Nuggets. They had a game that went into 4 overtimes, which, I mean, was like the longest game ever. Nikola Jokic had the most minutes logged in a game. Of course, CJ McCollum went crazy in Game 7 with like the LeBron-esque chase down block. And of course, the jump shot that sealed the deal. Gary Harris had like a crazy spin, like 360 layup. Jamal Murray shot it over the backboard. Rodney Hood's 3. There's so many moments in that series that I feel like don't get enough credit. And just because of the fact that, the Nuggets don't have too many big name players and the Blazers, got swept in the next round, I think that people aren't going to give that series credit. But personally, I think at least, maybe not the NBA Finals, of course, but maybe every other playoff series last year, that might have been the best one.
Yeah, I can for sure dig that. One that people don't talk about enough. It's kind of the rise up of the Nuggets, and one where we really got to see what Nikola Jokic really is made of.
Yeah. I will say, though, some other ones that I was thinking about picking, like 2014 with the Mavs and Spurs. The Mavs were an 8 seed and forced the Spurs to 7, which is insane. And then, of course, 2001 Raptors Sixers. We saw how that series went last year, and they kind of like reminisced on the Vince Carter shot that could have won them the series. I think those were other ones that were kind of notable as well.
Yeah, for sure. Ones that once again aren't talked about as much as they need to be. That's kind of just the whole theme of this part of the show. It's just things that aren't talked about enough, as much as they can be. That is.
Yeah. Now we're gonna move on. This is something based on something today in the NBA. Might be weird because there's no NBA going on, but it's a thought of Kevin Durant possibly returning. Now, we kind of thought about this when the season got suspended. He could possibly return. But according to GM Sean Marks, there's a pretty good chance he will return. So what do you think about the decision to return? Because obviously he was thinking about not coming back at all this season. And do you think that it could make them serious contenders in a weird time?
He needs to just sit out. They're not winning it this year. There's no reason to come back. You saw what happened when he came back in the finals, and I know the circumstances are a bit different. But there's really not a whole lot to play for right now. There's so much uncertainty. Sit it out, get some more rest, and just come back ready to play next year, because there's no reason to risk it again at this point in your career.
Yeah, I think it's probably best that he doesn't play, especially since the road that he'd have to go through would not be a fun one. I mean, you probably have to play the Raptors, then the Celtics, then the Bucks, and if you get to the finals, you're probably looking at a team like the Clippers or the Lakers or something. That's not a fun road. That might be arguably the hardest playoff matchups for a single player we've seen ever if he were to get to the finals or whatever. But I think it's the best decision probably for him not to play. But if he did play, it definitely, assuming, of course, he stays 100% healthy then, it would definitely make for some nice playoff matchups for sure. Probably, arguably one of the better first round matchups maybe we've seen ever, especially for a 2-7 seed.
Well, and to be fair, we don't even know. Let's assume basketball comes back. Who knows what the playoffs will even look like? Is it maybe 4 teams from each conference, or the first 2 series best of 5? Like, there's just so much that we don't know about right now that I wouldn't even be focused on Kevin Durant coming back.
Yeah, I mean that is a good point, but definitely an interesting thing to think about for sure. We're gonna move on though to a list that we have, another top 5 kind of list, and it's the clutchest players of all time in our opinion. Do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, let's go back and forth on it, kind of like we did for the series. I think that was a good way to go through it. Number 1, Michael Jordan for me. Not much more I need to say. Let's say you.
I agree. That's literally it. It's just Michael Jordan's number 1. I'll say my number 2 though. Number 2, I have Larry Bird. Now there's interesting arguments for a few other people here. I just think Larry Bird was kind of like a killer in the sense that like I can't remember any time except for maybe with the one shot he missed in the finals, like that fadeaway shot from like the left corner. I can't think of another time where Larry Bird, choked or anything like that. But I think definitely he's up there, especially the way he'd get in your head and then you come out and prove it. Sometimes he'd tell the other coach, like, I'm going to do this move exactly, and then he'd come out and just prove it right away. So I have Larry Bird number 2.
Interesting. I went with LeBron at number 2. He's forever going to be known for choking against the Mavericks in 2011. But outside of that, he has hit some very, very big shots in the playoffs. He's had the help of Kyrie Irving hitting a 3, Ray Allen hitting a 3. But he's hit those game winners against Toronto, game winner against Indiana. He had that game-winning 3 against the Magic. He's hit some very big shots in the playoffs to keep his team alive.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a fair argument. Should I go number 3 or you?
Go for it.
Okay, number 3, and I will say, I think a lot of the players that I went with, the clutchest players of all time, are players that I think would kind of get it done themselves, in a sense, like kind of, get the shot. It doesn't matter what's happening, they're still going to make it. And that's why I put Kobe number 3. I know Kobe has, a lot of things you can go to where it's like, like against Utah as a rookie, or even like the game that they won the championship in 2010. Personally, I think that Kobe, though, also has a lot of moments where it's like he's came up big. Obviously, 2000 finals, like when Shaq ended up fouling out of the game. I'm not going to list them on, but of course his final game, 2011 against the Hornets, just some that come to mind, 06 against the Suns. But I think I have Kobe number 3.
Yeah, I went with Kobe at 3 as well. And I just saw actually on Twitter the other day, him scoring, I think it was 20 straight points in the 08 finals against the Celtics, or 09 maybe it is, 09. Incredible feat. Always put the team on his back, doing whatever it takes to win. I think he's at number 3 as well. My number 4 is Larry Bird. So I'm a little lower than you. You outlined the points, but I just felt that the 3 ahead of him are too much for me to elevate him any higher than that.
It's interesting. Number 4, I have someone we haven't even named, and I have Jerry West. And I think Jerry West might be really a lot of the players from a long time ago, like Oscar Robertson, Jerry West, even like Dr. J. I think they are becoming like underrated in a sense for like at least most of the current NBA fans. This guy was arguably a top 3 finals performer ever. And I know he only has 1 championship to prove for it, but I mean, if winning a finals MVP on the losing team doesn't say enough for it, then I don't know what else will. And I mean, this guy, he had almost like his whole career, like was his prime. Like, I don't think he ever like dipped off really low. Most people, like, you can see like their career winding down, like Shaq with the Celtics or Cavs, or Vince Carter with the Hawks, Grizzlies, all these other teams. I don't believe Jerry West even had that. And I checked something with like the clutch shooting percentage just before this, and Jerry West is like surprisingly higher than nearly everybody in that category. So I think that's insane. I had to put Jerry West number 4.
There is also a reason that he's the logo of the NBA. People sleep on that. One of the only player to ever win Finals MVP from a losing team. His resume certainly screams clutch. My number 5 is Reggie Miller, though. Big shot. Reggie Miller has always hit some big shots in his career. Never got over the hump to win it all, but has always made the big shot when given the chance.
It's funny you put Reggie Miller because I didn't think you were going to have him, because I actually have him as my number 5. Yeah, I mean, obviously 8 points in 9 seconds. Like he always, and it's really unfortunate that he didn't have better teammates, because if he were given more opportunities late in playoff series, late in, maybe if he would make the finals a few more times or something like that, then he probably could have showed like why, he's one of the greatest players of all time. Even though his statistics don't really say it, he's definitely one of the most clutch players that we've ever seen, and it's kind of unfortunate that he didn't really have the help around him to get to where he wanted, and that's a championship.
Yeah, and I have to ask this. Did you have any thoughts about putting Robert Horry on the list?
Not really. And I will say this because, yes, Robert Horry has hit a lot of big shots. That's why they call him Big Shot Bob, against like the Kings in 2002, the 2005 finals when he was with the Spurs. But I will say that a lot of that also comes from being in the right spot. Like we saw it with, Steve Kerr in 1997, and we saw it like with Ray Allen in 2013. Not that those players aren't clutch. I mean, Ray Allen in his prime was really clutch too. But I mean, in those situations, like I feel like those are the types of shots that Robert Horry often made. It's not like you could give the ball to Robert Horry in the last 10 seconds and let him go to work like you could with pretty much any of these guys that I had on my list.
Yeah, that's certainly a fair argument to be had. It's just also hard to not consider somebody when he has hit some of the biggest shots in history. But I can certainly see where you're coming from.
Yeah, I think him, and along with probably also Derek Fisher, deserve some recognition for that. But in terms of like the most clutch players of all time, I don't think you can rely on those guys necessarily in the sense where it's like, I'm going to give you the ball and like we'll let you have the last shot. You can hold it for the last 10 seconds, because we've seen like all these players, I'm pretty sure, in those situations. So I just don't see that with those guys.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I guess I can dig that. No arguments being made.
Yeah, but it's gonna do it for the show. Hope you guys enjoyed. Obviously, any last words, Johnny?
Nothing off the top of my head. Thank you for the continued support, everybody. Continue to leave your feedback, leave your comments below. Leave some topics that you'd like us to talk about. This is just a quarantine lifestyle that we're living, trying to dig up some topics and kind of just about some hypothetical what-ifs.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds repetitive, but keep putting stuff in the comments, and hopefully we'll be watching more NBA sooner than later. But hope you guys enjoyed, and we're out. Peace.
Peace.